My opportunity now to introduce our guest speaker, Admiral William McRaven is the Commander, U.S. Forces, U.S. SOCOM, and it is my honor and privilege to bow to him, to allow him to have the stage.
Well, thank you very much. Okay. Can you still hear me? Talk slower and softer. I was telling Tommy Norris a few minutes ago that when I was a young midshipman, he was one of the first SEALs I had the opportunity to meet when I was between my junior and senior year in college. And I had traveled out to San Diego, had the opportunity to meet with then Lieutenant Doug Hughes. Doug invited Tommy in, and Tommy had already been awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor, and he was gracious, he was professional, he inspired me, and as a result of that, the decision was easy when I was a senior to become a Navy SEAL. So Tommy, thanks very much for that, and I salute you. Well, good morning. Again, it's great to be here at the UDT SEAL Muster. Representative West, Admiral Olson, fellow Flag and General Officers, Medal of Honor recipient Tom Norris, Gold Star families, wounded warriors, plank owners, distinguished guests, frogmen from World War II to present, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so very much for being here today. I want to take a moment up front to extend my special thanks to everyone that had a hand in setting up this first-class event, and especially Rick Kaiser and Willard Snyder, the driving forces behind the museum and the muster. Once again, Rick, Willard, thanks very much. See these great young men and women in front of you, the Palm Beach Sea Cadets, for providing the color guard, the pipe and drum performance. Very well done. Dove Moore for that wonderful rendition of the national anthem. Soon you will see the men from SEAL Team 8 and HSC 9, who will be here in a few minutes after these remarks. Palm Beach County Sheriff's Department for providing continued support year after year. The town of Fort Pierce and St. Lucie County for their continued support over the many years. And as Willard mentioned, the county commissioners, absolutely stellar support. And I would be remiss if I did not mention the Fort Pierce community for their continued support to this museum and this weekend. I was in Dave's Diner earlier this morning. The place was packed with folks, local residents, and many of you out there. Of course, the line was a mile long, but the food was good. I compliment Dave. It is a great honor to be here with you today as we celebrate, as Tommy mentioned, the 50th anniversary of the SEAL teams, as well as the 27th anniversary of the museum's opening. Your presence here this morning unites the past, the present, and the future. As I walked through the park and around the museum earlier today, I was awed by the exhibits that recall our glorious history. It's hard to believe that 27 years ago, 27 years have passed since this museum opened. Back then, there was some angst and curiosity as to whether this relatively small facility could even survive, whether it could attract enough visitors to remain viable. Well, it is clear now that the vision, the leadership, and the hard work of the museum's founders resulted in something that is not just surviving, it is thriving. And much of the credit goes to the local communities who have given this museum their strong and unfailing support. You have clearly demonstrated your patriotism and your pride by investing in what is now a national landmark. Elected and appointed community leaders have certainly made decisions that have served this museum exceedingly well. The purpose of the museum, as Rick mentioned earlier, is to preserve the rich history of America's naval commandos. At the core of our rich history, you will find a common DNA that has been passed from generation to generation, as well as a warrior's ethos that was forged not 50 years ago, but nearly 70 years ago. Undoubtedly, the men of Naval Special Warfare are who they are today because of what began right here. When I think of the men that came before us, the inventors who trained and built the force, and the leaders who truly broke the trail for a legacy of excellence, there are several that come to mind. But at Fort Pierce, there is only one. Lieutenant Commander Draper Kaufman was one of the first frogmen and the forefather of modern-day SEALs. Kaufman was a volunteer who served multiple times in the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. His experiences in 1941 during attacks on London would lay the foundation of steady nerves and iron resolve that would be required of all frogmen during the coming years of war. In June 1943, in the midst of World War II, the United States was heavily engaged in both the European and the Pacific theaters of operation. Lieutenant Commander Kaufman was charged with creating and commanding Naval Combat Demolition School at Fort Pierce. His task was to build a unit that could breach the heavily defended obstacle belts of the enemy shorelines. What they didn't tell him, what he instinctively knew, is it would require a special breed of man for that mission. A man capable of operating in the shadows as part of a small, lightly armed team, always in front of the main force with little to no support. It is right here that volunteers gathered to commence training, and Kaufman had a knack for finding those of us with a unique desire to go above and beyond the call of duty. The intense training that Kaufman designed was intended to weed out anybody who was not tough enough. He knew this new facet of warfare would require tremendous endurance and raw courage. For those frogmen in the audience that don't know it, it was Kaufman. It was his idea to shrink the 8 weeks of training into 1 week. Today's Navy SEALs know this week of training as Hell Week, so you can blame it on Kaufman.
Yeah.
The author Henry Stanley Haskins once said, "What lies before and behind us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us." To Kaufman, that was common sense. He was truly a visionary. He made the training extremely tough and severely demanding with the intention of producing a new kind of warrior, a frogman who would evolve and adapt in any environment, a man that was tenacious, innovative, and courageous, brave men who could endure the cold waters of their chosen profession, men of great character who had abnormally large hearts and a desire to accomplish the task regardless of the difficulties. The results of his efforts created what is arguably the best special operations force the world has ever seen, and it all began right here. 1 year later, almost to the day, the first graduates of Kaufman's school would be put to the test on the bloody beaches of Normandy. Over half the men assigned to clear the obstacles from Omaha Beach were killed or wounded. Despite heavy casualties that day, they succeeded in opening the beachhead for the invasion that would bring down Nazi Germany. To those men, failure was not an option. They had tasted failure countless times in training, and they knew they didn't like it. The only way to overcome failure was to bond together as a team of frogmen, a team of SEALs, a team of warriors who came from the sea, the air, and the land. Kaufman's men had equal impact in the Pacific, hopping from island to island in front of our amphibious forces. They supported the Army and the Marines in liberation of countless islands. From Iwo Jima to Okinawa to Borneo, it was one bloody victory after another, and they led some of the most successful amphibious operations of the campaign. These hard aquamen, with only a mask, fins, K-bar knife, UDT swim trunks, and some demo, were later dubbed Naked Warriors. After 30 years, almost 30 years later, on a North Vietnamese beach, a young petty officer named Mike Thornton would rush to the aid of his wounded lieutenant, killing several enemy soldiers in the process and swimming his wounded officer out to sea several miles before he was picked up by a Navy vessel. Mike would go on to win the Congressional Medal of Honor for his gallantry. And the man he saved, Lieutenant Tom Norris, was also awarded the Medal of Honor for leading the operation to rescue a downed U.S. Air Force officer. The SEALs who carried the torch after Vietnam reshaped and recast our missions to meet the demands of the 70s, 80s, and the 90s. Without their stewardship during the lean times, we would not have survived to this day. They assisted in putting down the Soviet bear, numerous despots and dictators from Panama to Somalia to Iraq, German and Palestinian terrorists, all threatening our people and our way of life. We owe all of these men a great debt as well. With each passing decade, a legacy of action evolved and matured. Then came September 11, 2001. People say that 9/11 changed everything, but that's not true. Our SEALs, SWCC, and those that supported us continued to do what Naval Special Warfare has always done: adapt, evolve, and succeed. Iraq and Afghanistan may have changed how we fight, but it did not change who we are. The DNA remained the same, the ethos always holding fast. SEALs would spend the next 11 years with no ocean in sight, but no one would ever question their ability to come from the sea, the air, or the land. Today's SEALs are forged from the same fires that produced the hard frogmen of the past. Their tradecraft has continued to evolve and been honed to a razor's edge, represented by the tridents on their chest. Over the past 11 years, we have introduced new words into the SEAL lexicon: predators and reapers, strike eagles, JDAMs, MRAPs, NVGs, thermobaric grenades, FOBs, and COPs. But we have not removed the words that really matter: honor, integrity, character, loyalty, credibility, tenacity, perseverance, determination, commitment, and most important, the one word that represents all that is good about being a SEAL: teammate. In the SEAL teams, the greatest compliment one SEAL can bestow upon another is to call him a teammate. 9/11 created a new generation of heroes and a new generation of teammates. Men like Petty Officer Andrew Buckley, who on the night of 8 September 2009 in Malwan village, Afghanistan, ran through a field filled with IEDs to render aid to his wounded officer who had stepped on a pressure plate IED. Or Mike Mansour, who jumped on a grenade when it was the only way to save his teammates. Or Mike Murphy, who gave his life in an attempt to save the men of Operation Red Wings. Marcus Luttrell, Matthew Axelson, Danny Dietz, Mark Donald, Britt Slavinsky, Steph Bass, Brad Krotz, the men of Turbine 3-3, Extortion 17, and Aussie 7-2, and hundreds of others who sometimes gave their lives and every time gave their all to be teammates. So at the end of the day, it's not about the 50th anniversary of the SEALs. It's about the 70 years of the Frogmen. Not only have we earned the respect of the nation and our foes as the military's most elite fighting force, we have shaped the fate of America in so many other ways. The Frogmen before us have been governors, senators, astronauts, successful businessmen, authors, artists, actors, and we currently have 12 flag officers who are helping to influence critical national decisions from the White House to CENTCOM, SOUTHCOM, AFRICOM, and the heart of Afghanistan. But most importantly, we have teams of men with incredible character. These men are now guided by the ethos of our predecessors, and it is captured in the SEAL Creed. We will never quit. We will protect our teammates. We will accomplish the mission. We are never out of the fight. We will serve with honor on and off the battlefield. Our word is our bond, and our trident is our symbol of honor, bestowed on us by heroes who have gone before us. It is a privilege that we must earn every single day. And to those who loved us, who stand beside us, who guide us when we lose our way, who comfort us when we lose a comrade, lift us up when we fall down, and give us hope so that we have something to return to those families and friends, you are as much a part of this legacy as any man wearing a trident. In closing, as we look back on where we have been and take stock of who we are today, we should honor our forefathers, celebrate our accomplishment, and look forward to the next 70 years of history that will be captured right here at the Fort Pierce Museum. Thank you very much. May God bless the frogs, the SEALs and their families, and may God bless America.